Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivara Dari Jaya Girivara Dari Yashodanandana Brajajana Rajana Yashodanandana Brajajana Rajana Yashodanandana Brajajana Rajana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Naam Sankirtan ki jai Jagannath Baldeswara Mai ki jai Narasimha Bhagwan ki jai Panchatattva ki jai Shri Goswami ki jai Guru Parampara ki jai Shri Prabhupada ki jai Gurudev Tagore Pandari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances to the personality of God in Narayana, unto Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Yashta Prayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Neshtaki. By regular attendance in classes of the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Hare Krishna. So Hare Krishna, Prabhu is Mata is welcome all of you. Thank you for joining and keeping up the appointment with Krishna, right? We keep it. There's a lot of appointments with so many doctors and so many people. Keeping an appointment with Krishna is all the more beneficial because this is the Parama Aushadam. This is the best medicine for all our miseries. So today I'll be taking up every Saturday we take one canto and we divide into the first half and second half. So last week it was first canto, 13th chapter. The first half was being taken. That is up to the verse 30, 1 to 30. This chapter is 60 verses. Dhṛtarāṣṭra quits home. This is the chapter entitled. So today we'll be taking from 31 to 60. So I'll try my best to squeeze in within the time available and do justice to this wonderful verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, this chapter. So in fact, just before starting, we'll just start with one verse. We'll just recite and then we'll discuss the verses. I have taken the 41st verse because this is Narada's verse. He's saying this verse, right? So Narada Vacha Ma kanchana shucho rajan yadishvara vasham jagat loka sapala yasye me vahante balimishituh sasamyunakti bhutani saeva viyunakti cha Narada Ma kanchana shucho rajan yadishvara vasham jagat loka sapala yasye me vahanti balim nishituh sasamyunakti bhutani saeva vyunakti cha. Anybody would like wants to recite this verse? Please can do that. Can try, no problem. Again, anybody can try this recitation verse. Okay. Just to read the. Yes, Madaji.
Yeah.
Yes, Madaji, you can recite.
Yeah. Narada Vacha Ma Kanchana Shucho Rajan Yadishvara Vasham Jagat Lokha Sapala Yasye Me Vahanti Balam Ishituhu Sasamyu Nakti Bhutani Sayeva Viyunakti Cha. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Madaji. Hare Krishna. So, I just read the translation because the time is of essence. So, I will not read the word to word meaning and we'll discuss the purpose while we are discussing the class. So, translation goes like this. See, Narada said, O pious king, do not lament for anyone, for everyone is under the control of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, all living beings and their leaders carry on worship to be well protected. It is He only who brings them together and disperses them. So this chapter is entitled "This Dhṛtarāṣṭra Quits Home." Om Gyantimrandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gauravatavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Nanta Pravishya Mavachi Mam Prasuptam Sanjeevayati Akila Shakti Dharasvadhamnam Anyam cha Hasta Charana Shravanatogadi Prana Namo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam Namo Vishnu 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 Namo Vishnu Swami Ke Namani Namo Vishnu 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 Bhakti Vedanta Swami Vishnu Jai Shri Krishna. So, the lessons which we can learn from this chapter is really wonderful. See, the meaning of Dhṛtarāṣṭra's name is also very interesting. And it is very well matched with his nature. Dhrita means to catch hold of. And Rashtra means nation. Now, since he was very much attached to ruling the nation, he was called Dhṛtarāṣṭra. Just like how Dhṛtarāṣṭra was attached to the nation, we are also Dhrita house, Dhrita land, Dhrita gold, Dhrita dollar, right? Dhrita Dhiram. So this 13th chapter of first canto of Bhagavatam, which is entitled Dhṛtarāṣṭra Quits Home, it shows how a conditioned soul who is entangled in attachment to such material things can become free from all such entanglements. So let us all pray at the lotus feet of Guru, Prabhupada and all the Vaishnavas and try to meditate on some of the verses in this chapter. Suta Goswami begins this chapter by narrating to the sages about the return of Vidura to Hastinapura after his pilgrimage. So prior to the Kurukshetra war, Vidura being insulted by Duryodhana, he was considering as a special mercy of Lord Krishna, and he leaves for his pilgrimage. And during that time, he met the great sage Maitreya Muni and received transcendental knowledge. So we need to see some of the background before we go to the verse after the 30th, right? So otherwise the importance may not be thoroughly understood. That's why in the second verse, Suta Goswami says, after asking various questions, and becoming established in transcendental loving service of Lord Krishna, Vidura retired from putting questions to Maitreya. She was asking various questions, right? See, the word prashna in this verse means questions. And Prabhupada says how it is important for a person seeking transcendental knowledge to approach a bona fide spiritual master and ask questions about transcendental knowledge. And also the word Upararama in this verse means retired from. Now Vidura retired from asking questions to Maitreya Muni. Now Prabhupada says in the purport, Vidura retired from putting questions before Maitreya Muni when he was convinced by Maitreya Rishi that the summum bonum of life is to be finally situated in the transcendental loving service of the Lord Krishna, who is Govinda, one who satisfies his devotees in all respects. See, all of us are in search of happiness in this material world. Presume, right? Nobody is asking for miseries, excepting whom? Kunti Maharani, right? In her prayers. And Srila Prabhupada refers this search to hunger. In his wonderful purport to first canto, 12th chapter, 6th verse, Prabhupada says, the whole material world is full of hungry living beings. The hunger is not for food, shelter, or sense gratification. Hunger is for spiritual atmosphere. And this hunger is actually for spiritual food, spiritual shelter, spiritual sense gratification. Spiritual sense gratification. So this can be obtained in the association of the Supreme Spirit, Lord Shri Krishna. Therefore, one who has them cannot be attracted by so-called food, shelter, defense, and sense gratification material world, even if they are relished by the denizens of the heavenly planets. See, a small child who is separated from the parents does not find solace, even after getting the best of eatables or toys, which he or she likes. So unless the child is brought back to his or her parents, the child can never be peaceful or satisfied. Similarly, unless the conditioned soul like us, are brought back to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, we can never be satisfied. That's why Srila Prabhupada very nicely giving the meaning for the word Govinda, one who satisfies his devotees in all respects. So here we find that Mahatma Vidura's hunger for transcendental knowledge was well satisfied by the transcendental instructions of Maitreya Muni. So he stopped asking further questions. See, when Vidura returned to the palace, all the members of the Kuru family felt very happy to see him again. And they gave him warm welcome. And after offering him due respects, food, etc., Yudhishthira Maharaj began to glorify him. So thanking Vidura for all the kindness and special care he had provided them right from childhood. Now Yudhishthira Maharaj says in the verse, in the 9th verse in this chapter, what does he say? Here he says, while traveling on the surface of the earth, how did you maintain your livelihood? At which holy places and pilgrimage sites did you render service? See, in the purport, Prabhupada says Vidura went out from the palace. Why did he go out of the palace? To detach himself from household affairs, especially political discussions and all. So when Duryodhana insulted him, he decided to quit his paternal house and prepare for the renounced order of life. My Guru Maharaj always used to say, very nicely say, we should always be ready for such situations, even in our own lives in this material world. Whether it is home, whether it is work, whether it is temple community, whatever we are, we should not be attached to that place. Our only positive attachment should be to serving Supreme Lord wherever we are, in whichever situation Krishna places us. We should keep our baggage ready to leave. He used to say, we should leave the house when others are asking, why are you leaving? Otherwise, a day will come when people will be asking, when are you leaving? So Vidura, being a pure devotee of the Lord, is an incarnation of Yamaraj. And he is one of the 12 Mahajanas. He practically showing us how and when we should leave and what we should do after leaving. And when Duryodhana insulted him, Vidura just left the palace at once and happily. And happily he visited all the pilgrimage places. Yudhishthira Maharaj, knowing the great devotion of his uncle, Vidura, was eager to learn from him. He said what all service he had done during the pilgrimage. So the lesson for us is that when we visit dhams, we should also have this service attitude. Visiting dhams should not be done like visiting picnic spots. When we visit dhams, we should hear about Krishna from authentic sources and try to serve the dham as well as the devotees. So Yudhishthira Maharaj was very sure that his uncle Vidura would not have wasted his time in idle talks. So with great eagerness, he wanted to learn from Vidura as to what services he had done during the pilgrimage. So if Vidura had left, now the question is, if Vidura had left the house to prepare himself for renounced order of life, why did he return back to Hastinapur after the war was over? This is a very practical question, right? So in the 14th verse, we get the answer. So here, Suta Goswami explains the reason why Vidura returned to Hastinapur palace after taking to renounced order of life. So the translation says, thus Mahatma Vidura, being treated just like a godly person by his kinsmen, remained there for a certain period just to rectify the mentality of his elder brother. In this way, bring happiness to all others. So the reason why Vidura returned was Bhratur Jeshtasya Shreyaskrit, for the well-being of his elder. Who is his elder brother? Dhṛtarāṣṭra. So Vidura was ill-treated by Duryodhana. So Dhṛtarāṣṭra, out of paternal love, neither chastised his son, nor did he care to support his brother Vidura, who had always been giving good counsel throughout his life. He didn't even care to ask for forgiveness for the unjust action of his son. So in spite of such ungrateful attitude of Dhṛtarāṣṭra, Vidura did not give up his well-wishing attitude for Dhṛtarāṣṭra. So to do good or wish good for those, see, very nice point to understand for us, for everyone. To do good or wish good for those who like us or wish good for us is very easy. But to show mercy, kindness to people who have insulted or dishonored us is a glorious attitude. That is why Vidura is being addressed here as Mahatma Vidura. See, Prabhupada mentions in this purport, Mahatma Vidura had already adopted the renounced order of life. And therefore, he did not return to his paternal palace to enjoy some material comforts. He accepted out of his own mercy what was offered to him by Maharaj Yudhishthira. But the purpose of living in the palace was to deliver his elder brother, Dhṛtarāṣṭra, who was too much attached materially. See, Dhṛtarāṣṭra lost all his state descendants in the fight with Maharaj Yudhishthira. And still, due to his sense of helplessness, he did not feel ashamed to accept the charity and hospitality of Maharaj Yudhishthira. See, on the part of Maharaj Yudhishthira, it was quite in order to maintain his uncle in a befitting manner. But acceptance of such magnanimous hospitality by Dhṛtarāṣṭra was not at all desirable. He accepted because he thought that there is no alternative. Vidura particularly came to enlighten Dhṛtarāṣṭra and to give him a lift, higher status of spiritual ideas. So it is the duty of enlightened souls, to deliver the fallen ones. And Vidura came for that reason. But talks of spiritual enlightenment are so refreshing that while instructing Dhṛtarāṣṭra, Vidura attracted the attention of all the members of the family, and all of them took pleasure in hearing him patiently. So this is the way of spiritual realization. See, pure devotees of the Lord, they do not care for personal honor or dishonor. They don't take such things to the heart. Their hearts are full of Krishna. And they only care for pleasing the Lord by assisting him in the glorious mission of reclaiming the fallen souls back to God. We can learn from Mahatma Vidura that apart from practicing bhakti ourselves, it becomes our utmost responsibility.
आधे बर्तन ले जाते इतनी जल्दी में रहते हो.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. So we can learn from Mahatma Vidura that apart from practicing bhakti ourselves, it is our responsibility to pass on this gift of bhakti, which has been kindly bestowed upon us by Guru and Gauranga, to everyone without any discrimination. So that will definitely please the Supreme Lord. Now, Suta Goswami is mentioning, as long as Vidura was playing the role of Shudra. See, Srila Prabhupada gives very nice explanation of how the role of Shudra does not deny one from giving spiritual knowledge to others. Although being born as a Shudra, it does not disqualify Vidura to rule. You see, he was a Shudra, no? That's why he could not rule the Hastinapur. He was disqualified. But it did not stop him from giving good counsel to Dhṛtarāṣṭra. Prabhupada very nicely says that since Vidura renounced the world for spiritual enlightenment by the authority of Sri Maitreya Muni, he was thoroughly educated by him in transcendental knowledge. And he was quite competent to occupy the post of an Acharya or spiritual master. So, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has also said that as soon as one gets transcendental knowledge from a bona fide guru, he becomes eligible to preach the message of Lord irrespective of one's birth. See, even in the ordinary moral codes, right, maintained by Chanakya Pandita, who is a great politician and moralist, right, there is no harm in taking lessons from a person who may be by birth less than a Shudra. Now, Srila Prabhupada reveals us the real identity of Vidura. Vidura was not actually a Shudra. Prabhupada says he was to play the part of a so-called Shudra for 100 years, being cursed by Manduka Muni. And he was the incarnation of Yamraj, one of the 12 Mahajanas. And he was on the level of such exalted personalities like Brahma, Narada, Shiva, Bhishma, Prahlada, right? So being a Mahajana, it is the duty of Yamaraj to preach the kind of devotion to the people of the world, as Narada, Brahma and other Mahajanas do. So Vidura was well qualified to instruct Dhṛtarāṣṭra, and the instructions given by Vidura to Dhṛtarāṣṭra, they carry great value for conditioned souls like us, as they are the instructions given by Yamaraj himself. See, old age without Krishna consciousness is such a great pain for the miseries, will make us really mad. Our body will not cooperate with us, and we will not be able to do whatever we want. So unless we take shelter of Krishna and Srimad Bhagavatam and learn to depend only on Krishna alone, Guru Maharaj used to say the four walls of our household itself will tear us apart. So seeing his elder brother Dhṛtarāṣṭra still attached to the royal throne, Mahatma Vidura asks him to leave the palace immediately and take to path of self-realization. That's why in the 18th verse, see Mahatma Vidura knew all this, and therefore he addressed Dhṛtarāṣṭra saying, "My dear king, please get out of here immediately. Do not delay. Just see how fear has overtaken you." See, from the beginning, Dhṛtarāṣṭra always, he yearned to be the king, no? Although he was not qualified for the same. He was born blind due to past karma. But he could never accept the fact that he was unfit to be a king. So his whole life was miserable and full of anxieties. He was happy to become king when Pandu died early. But then again he was anxious that his son Duryodhana should occupy the throne after him. So this attachment to the royal throne killed his peace of mind. Maharaj Yudhishthira, knowing the mental condition of his aged uncle Dhṛtarāṣṭra, he very graciously allowed him to hold on to the royal throne even after the war. But since it is not correct for Dhṛtarāṣṭra to still continue like that, Vidura specifically addresses Dhṛtarāṣṭra as Rajan, my dear king. Now, Prabhupada says in the purport, Vidura as a saint and as the duty-bound affectionate youngest brother of Dhṛtarāṣṭra, he wanted to awaken Dhṛtarāṣṭra from his slumber of disease and old age. And therefore, he sarcastically addressed Dhṛtarāṣṭra as the king, which he actually was not. Everyone is a servant of eternal time. And therefore, no one can be king in this material world. King means the person who can order. Therefore, one is also a false king in this material world. And Dhṛtarāṣṭra was particularly reminded of this false position and of the factual, fearful happenings which had already approached him at that. Vidura asked him to get out immediately if he wanted to be saved from the fearful situation which was approaching him fast. He did not ask Maharaj Yudhishthira in that way because Vidura did not ask Maharaj Yudhishthira, no, because he knew that a king like Maharaj Yudhishthira is aware of all the fearful situations of this flimsy world and would take care of himself in due course, even though Vidura might not be present at that time. So that much he knew. So just like how Dhṛtarāṣṭra was after the false position of king, we all hanker after our own imaginary false positions. We fail to realize the fact that we cannot get these positions in this material world. When they are not in our quota, even if we hang ourselves upside down, even if we get some position here as per our quota, still it is temporary only. So instead of hankering for such illusory positions and becoming miserable, it is important that we wake up to the reality and strive to become servant of the Supreme Lord. For that is our real eternal identity. See, in the 19th verse, says, no, this frightful situation cannot be remedied by any person in this material world. My Lord, it is the Supreme Personality of Godhead as eternal time, Kala, that has approached us all. See, death is inevitable. But time and again, we find that we don't want to accept this plain truth. And somehow or the other try to find some remedy to escape from death and prolong our stay in the material world. In this verse, the two words, Kutaschit and Karhichit means by any means, and Karhichit means by anyone. See, we keep asking doctors to somehow or the other extend our stay for some more time in this world. But the phrase, as sure as death, is always true. Even though we may not like it or want it. Correct? Vidura very well knew this mental condition of Dhṛtarāṣṭra. And so, even before he could ask for some remedy, Vidura makes it very clear to him that all of us would have to appear for the final exam of death without fail. See, there is a nice story about how Lord Vishnu once visited Kailash, the abode of Lord Shiva. Lord Vishnu left behind at the entrance Garuda. He left Garuda at the entrance. Now Garuda sat alone. He was marveling, at the natural splendor of the place. Suddenly, his eyes fell on a beautiful creature, a little bird seated on the arch, crowning the entrance to Lord Shiva's place. Now, Garuda wondered, he was thinking, how marvelous is creation, right? One who has created these huge mountains has also made this tiny bird, and both seem equally wonderful. Just then, Yamaraj came passing by with the intention of meeting Lord Shiva. And as he crossed the arch, Yamaraj's eyes went over to the bird, and he raised his brows in a very quizzical expression. He was thinking, what is this? Then he took his eyes off the bird and disappeared inside. See, even a slight glance of Yamaraj is said to be the harbinger of death. So Garuda told himself, Yamaraj looking intently at the bird can mean only one thing. The bird's time is up. Perhaps on his way back, he will carry away the bird's soul with him. Now, Garuda's heart was filled with pity for the helpless creature. So that it was. So he was very agonized. So Garuda, he resolved to save the bird from the clutches of death. What did he do? He swooped it up in his mighty wings, and rushed to a forest thousands of miles away and left the bird on a rock beside a brook. Then he returned to Kailash and regained his position at the entrance gate. That is the speed of Garuda, right? So soon after, Yamaraj emerged from inside and nodded to Garuda in recognition. Now Garuda greeted him and said, Maharaj, while going in, you saw a bird, and for a moment you became pensive. Why? Yamaraj replied, well, when my eyes fell on this little bird, I saw that it was to die in a few minutes, swallowed by a python, far away from here in the forest near a brook. I wondered how this tiny creature would traverse the 1,000 miles separating from its destiny in such a short time. So, but there are no such serpents here high on Kailash. And I was briefly puzzled. Then I forgot. Surely it must have happened somehow. Saying this, Yamaraj smiled and went away. Every one of us have come with an expiry date in this middle. Although we might know, we may not know the date, right? Just like Parikshit Maharaj, at least he knew. It is bound to happen at the right time. None of the people in this middle world can provide any remedy for this. So understanding the truth, we should strive in the path of going back home, back to. See, in the 20th verse, he says, whoever is under the influence of supreme Kala, eternal time, must surrender his most dear life and want to speak of other things such as wealth, honor, children, and land and home. See, at the time of death, no matter how much ever we love our family, friends, possessions in this middle world, we would have to give up everyone and everything. None of them will accompany us in the final day. My Guru Maharaj insisted that before chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra, we should chant this mantra. I have to go, leaving everything behind. He said, I have to go, mujhe jana hai, mujhe jana hai. So most of the problems in life are because we think that we will stay here forever. And as a result, we become attached to so many things here. When we remember that we are just a guest in this material world, then we will not make any unnecessary demands. So Vidura informed Dhṛtarāṣṭra that there is no point being attached to the throne or nation, for it is not possible to take them along with him in his final journey. So as a responsible brother, Vidura tried his best to make Dhṛtarāṣṭra understand that it is very important for him to renounce these temporary assets and refocus his attention towards Krishna, towards his names, his form, etc. So once Yudhishthira Maharaj is questioned by Yaksh, see once Yudhishthira Maharaj, you remember, he was questioned by Yaksha as to what is the most wonderful thing in this world. Now Yudhishthira Maharaj replied, the most wonderful thing is that although every day innumerable humans and the animals go to the abode of death, still a man thinks he is immortal. We also think that death will never visit us, even though we see some of our near and dear ones die. That's when the 21st verse, he says, your father, brother, well-wishers, sons, all are dead and passed away. You yourself have expanded the major portion of your life. Your body is now overtaken by invalidity, and you're living in the home of another. See, Vidura reminded Dhṛtarāṣṭra as to how right from the beginning there has been so many deaths in the family of the Kurus. Now Dhṛtarāṣṭra's father died, then his brother Pandu died. Later in the battle of Kurukshetra, almost all his near and dear ones died. Right from acharyas like Bhishma, Drona, Kripa, down to small ant, all of them died. That's why in Bhagavatam 7, 9, 19, Prahlad Maharaj offers a wonderful prayer to Lord Narasimhadev, revealing the truth that only because of Lord's merciful glance, we all are surviving. Once he withdraws his mercy, we can no longer survive. He said, so here Prahlad says, my Lord Narasimhadev, O Supreme, because of a bodily conception of life, embodied souls, neglected and not cared for by you, cannot do anything for their betterment. Whatever remedies they accept, although perhaps temporarily beneficial, are certainly impermanent. For example, the father and mother cannot protect their child, the physician and medicine cannot relieve a suffering patient, and a boat on the ocean cannot protect a drowning man. So unless the Supreme Lord sanctions or allows, neither family members nor friends nor anything else can protect us in any way, for all are limited and temporary. That's why pure devotees of the Lord know the art of foreseeing death. And here we find Vidura helping Dhṛtarāṣṭra to foresee his final days. See in the 22nd and 23rd verse, Vidura points out to Dhṛtarāṣṭra. Let us see what is 22 and 23. 22 he says, you have been blind from your very birth and recently you have become hard of hearing. Your memory is shortened, your intelligence is disturbed, your teeth are loose, your liver is defective, and you are coughing up mucus. See, this is symptoms of old age. That's what Prabhu says, right? In the 23rd verse, he says, alas, how powerful are the hopes of a living being to continue his life. Verily, you are living just like a household dog and are eating remnants of food given by people. How powerful statements, right? So here, Vidura points out to Dhṛtarāṣṭra that all the symptoms of old age or dwindling stage has already manifested fully in him. And so he has to at least start preparing himself now to face the next stage of death. Prabhupada very nicely mentions the purport that all these symptoms are warnings for our nearing death. So realizing these warnings, we have to become more serious in our path of spiritual progress. As soon as Dasharath Maharaj saw one white hair on his head, he decided to do the coronation ceremony for his son Lord Ram and take to renounce order of life. But unfortunately, most of us are like Dhṛtarāṣṭra and don't even realize these warnings sent by Krishna and have hope against hope to live forever in this material world. When the king of elephants, Gajendra, was caught by the crocodile and was struggling for 1,000 years, Gajendra realized that none of his friends or relatives can save him and that the only shelter is Supreme Lord. That's why he says Gajendra did not hope or desire to live in the elephant body after being saved from the crocodile. The elephant body is anyhow temporary and prone to dwindle and drop down sooner or later, even if he's saved from this danger. So Gajendra only desires for eternal life in spiritual world. Similarly, foreseeing our imminent death and futility of this material body, we should refocus our attention to go back to Godhead. See, the 24th verse, there is no need to live a degraded life and subsist on the charity of those whom you tried to kill by arson and poisoning. You also insulted their married wife and usurped their kingdom and wealth. See, in order to awaken Dhṛtarāṣṭra from the deep slumber of what? Of material attachment, Vidura openly says how it is very disgraceful for Dhṛtarāṣṭra to live at the mercy of those people whom he had been attempting to kill all these years. It is said that dishonor is worse than death. But Dhṛtarāṣṭra did not care for such things and is simply interested in continuing his royal life, forgetting all the injustice he had done to the Pandavas. Prabhupada very nicely says in the purport, 5,000 years ago, there was one Dhṛtarāṣṭra. 5,000 years ago, there was one Dhṛtarāṣṭra. But at the present moment, there are Dhṛtarāṣṭras in every home. Politicians especially do not retire from political activities unless they are dragged by the cruel hand of death or killed by some opposing element. To stick to family life to the end of one's human life is the grossest type of degradation. And there is an absolute need for the Viduras to educate such Dhṛtarāṣṭras, even in the present moment. What a beautiful statement of Prabhupada. Dhṛtarāṣṭra was attached to Rashtra. And each one of us are Dhrita, holding on to so many other things in this material world. So instead of being Dhṛtarāṣṭra, we should become Dhṛtahari, like Lord Brahmaji, when he prays, no? See, when Narada Muni asks Brahmaji the secret of his transcendental knowledge, Brahmaji very nicely says in Bhagavatam 2.6.34, Na bharati meng nrushopalakshyate. Sorry. Na bharati meng nrushopalakshyate. Na vai kochin me manaso mrishagati. Na me rishikani patantya satpate. Yanme ridokantya drito hari. Drita hari. He says, oh Narada, because I have caught hold of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Hari with great zeal, whatever I say has never proved to have been false, nor is the progress of my mind ever deterred, or my senses have never degraded by temporary attachment matter. So instead of holding on to different kinds of temporary shelters in the material world, which will only give us frustrations, pain, and disease, we should simply hold on to the lotus feet of Lord Hari with great zeal and earnestness. And that alone will guarantee us life of peace, bliss, knowledge, and eternity. Now in the 25th verse, Vidur Maharaj is telling, despite your unwillingness to die and your desire to live even at the cost of honor and prestige, your miserly body will certainly dwindle and deteriorate like an old garment. See, as a responsible brother, and well-wisher, Vidura could not tolerate the sight of Dhṛtarāṣṭra drowning in the ocean of material ignorance due to his attachment to royal throne and his sons. So right from the beginning, Vidura was advising Dhṛtarāṣṭra, right? Now, Dhṛtarāṣṭra alone knew that Vidura was his true well-wisher. But as long as his sons were alive, the good instructions of Vidura were all falling on his deaf ears. Now, by the arrangement of the Supreme Lord, all his sons were killed, and Vidura wanted to make the best use of this opportunity to give him the final dose of transcendental knowledge. In the material world, when we stay for a few years in a particular home, city, or workplace, we tend to get attached to it. Likewise, the conditioned soul finds it difficult to leave the material body where it has been residing for so many years. But whether we like it or not, this body will deteriorate with time. It is said, Shiryate iti shariraha, body is bound to deteriorate. See, after giving sufficient advice to Dhṛtarāṣṭra about the futility of material existence, Vidura tells Dhṛtarāṣṭra how a Dhīra is one who goes to an unknown remote place and, free from all obligations, quits his material body when it becomes useless. Prabhupada very nicely defines Dhīra in the 27th verse. He says Dhīra means one who is not disturbed, even when there is sufficient provocation. It's a very nice point. So in case of Dhṛtarāṣṭra, he was very fortunate to get the association of Mahatma Vidura. That's why in the 28th verse, Vidura says, please therefore leave for the north immediately without letting your relatives know, for soon that time will approach which will diminish the good qualities of men. See, after all these instructions of Vidura, we find a great transformation in the heart of Dhṛtarāṣṭra, who leaves the palace without informing anyone. Neither his wife Gandhari nor his personal servant Sanjaya. His physical blindness was also no more a barrier for him. as Vidura has forced open his transcendental vision. So simply depending on Supreme Lord Dhṛtarāṣṭra, he left the palace. So Vidura's preaching reached the heart of Dhṛtarāṣṭra because Vidura himself was a Narottama. He practiced what he preached. So our prachar, our preaching will be effective only when our achar, practice is good. So if we don't practice what we preach, then it will never touch the heart of the listeners. So Vidura had come back to Hastinapur, the sole purpose of helping Dhṛtarāṣṭra to come out of the darkness of ignorance. So once his job was done, Vidura left the palace. Throughout his life, he was ill-treated by the Kauravas. Now that the Pandavas were in rule, he would have definitely been well received and respected in the Kuru assembly. But Vidura was not after honor, position, or power. As soon as Dhṛtarāṣṭra left, Vidura also left the palace. That's when 30th verse, he says, the gentle and chaste Gandhari, who was the daughter of King Subala of Kandahar or Gandhara, followed her husband, seeing that he was going to the Himalaya mountains, which are the delight of those who have accepted the staff of the renowned order, like fighters who accepted a good lashing from the enemy. See the words Pativrata. See in this 30th verse, Sutta Goswami describes how Gandhari followed her blind husband when he left for the forest. The words Pativrata means one who is devoted to her husband. Hence, Sadhvi means chaste. Our senses always crave for sense enjoyment. Hardly do we care for others or feel others' pain. But Gandhari was unique personality. So she is always counted one among the chaste women of the world. As soon as she heard that she would be married to Dhṛtarāṣṭra, who has been blind right from birth, she voluntarily chose to blindfold herself for the rest of her life, although she was blessed with good eyesight. Prabhupada mentions in the purport that just like how Mother Sita chose to follow her husband Lord Ram when he was banned to go to the forest, Gandhari also chose to accompany Dhṛtarāṣṭra, though he did not inform her. When Gandhari, when she had lost all her children and grandchildren, she could have very much gone back to her father's house or stayed back somewhere in the royal household, right? No one would have questioned her as to why she is staying back. But she simply followed her husband without any hesitation. So in one of the lectures, Srila Prabhupada, about in this verse, he says, Gandhari never said that I am now old, I have lost my children, these nephews, they are taking care of me. Why shall I go with my husband? No. Wherever Dhṛtarāṣṭra stayed, be it royal palace or forest, she simply followed him and tried to serve him. Just like how ascetics voluntarily suffers all kinds of sufferings, Gandhari accepted and tolerated all the miserable conditions which she had to face in her life. So when Maharaj Yudhishthira came to offer respects to his uncle and aunt, he could not find them. So with great anxiety, he inquired Sanjaya to know the whereabouts of his uncles and aunt. That's why in the 33 and 34th verse, 33 he says, where is my well-wisher uncle Vidura, Mother Gandhari, who is very afflicted due to all her sons' demise? My uncle Dhṛtarāṣṭra was also very mortified due to the death of all sons and grandsons. Undoubtedly, I am very ungrateful. Did he, therefore, take my offenses very seriously and along with his wife drown himself in the Ganges? In 34 he says, when my father Pandu fell down and we were all small children, these two uncles gave us protection from all the kinds of calamities. They were always our good well-wishers. Alas, where have they gone from here? This is the question which Yudhishthira Maharaj is asking. See, although the Kauravas had always been troubling the Pandavas right from childhood, Yudhishthira Maharaj never had any hatred. He didn't have any hatred, malice, or ill feelings against them. He always considered them as his brothers and had genuine respect for Dhṛtarāṣṭra and Gandhari. So, even after the war, Yudhishthira Maharaj treated Dhṛtarāṣṭra and Gandhari with great care and respect. So, in these verses, we can see how Yudhishthira Maharaj is remembering the good things done by them in the childhood and feeling that he has troubled them by killing all their sons. See the mood of Yudhishthira Maharaj. This is the mood of a devotee. See, generally, our tendency is that we always remember the bad things which others do to us. We hardly care to remember or be grateful for the good things which they do. Also, when some living entity is troubling us, we hardly see Krishna in them or consider them as part and parcel of Krishna. We would be wondering as to when and how we could get rid of that person. But Yudhishthira Maharaj, being an exalted devotee of the Supreme Lord, is feeling thankful for the shelter and care provided by Dhṛtarāṣṭra during their childhood. He is concerned about their well-being and safety. That's why Prabhupada nicely glorifies the good nature of Yudhishthira Maharaj in the 33rd verse. He says, a devotee never finds fault with others. A devotee never finds fault with others, but tries to find his own and thus rectify them as far as possible. See, now from the 41st verse, Narada Muni starts responding. Very beautiful, because when Yudhishthira Maharaj, Sanjay also, he also didn't know where Dhṛtarāṣṭra and Gandhari, Vidura Maharaj had gone. At that time, Narada Muni entered and he started giving instructions. Wonderful instructions for us to learn. So we saw Yudhishthira Maharaj regretting for not being able to take care of Dhṛtarāṣṭra and Gandhari, right? So at that time, the Narada Muni appeared. He appeared at time. Always Narada Muni comes on time, right? To give transcendental knowledge and courage to Yudhishthira Maharaj. That's why in the 41st verse, he says, O pious king, do not lament for anyone, for everyone is under the control of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, all living beings and their leaders carry on worship to be well protected. It is he only who brings them together and disperses them. This is a very instructive message for all of us. See, in this material world, we are always thrown into perplexities and depression, right? The reason is because we think that we are the controllers. And when things go out of control, we become disturbed. That's why Narada Muni very clearly says not to lament for anyone, because Krishna is controlling everything. He says, Yad Ishvara Vasham Jagat. Narada Muni is speaking here based on his own experience in his previous birth as well. See, when Narada Muni was the son of a maid servant, he was completely dependent on his mother. She also wanted to take care of him nicely, but in due course of time, they were separated as his mother died. So while recollecting his past life, Narada Muni says to Vyasadeva in Bhagavatam 167, she wanted to look after my maintenance properly, but because she was not independent, she was not able to do anything for me. The world is under the full control of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, everyone is like a wooden doll in the hands of a puppet master. Yosha Darumai Yatha. That is, therefore, everyone is like a wooden puppet in the hands of a puppet master. See, after his mother's death, there was no one else to take care of Narada Muni, but still he was always protected by the Supreme Lord. Not only in his previous birth, but also in this birth of Narada Muni. Likewise, although Yudhishthira Maharaj was anxious about the well-being of his uncles and aunt, Narada Muni makes it clear to him that they are all protected by the Supreme Lord, irrespective of whether they are placed in the royal palace or in the dark forest. See, the point to be understood, to be remembered, is that we are limited. We should always remember that we are limited and we are not the controllers. The Lord is unlimited and he is the supreme controller. And whatever is happening in this world is all sanctioned and allowed by Supreme Lord, whether it is favorable or unfavorable. So the best thing to do is to simply accept his authority and his will and try to align ourselves according to Krishna's plan. That's why Prabhupada very nicely says in the purport, every living being, either in this material world or in the spiritual world, is under the control of the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Beginning from Brahmaji, the leader of this universe, down to the insignificant ant, all are abiding by the order of the Supreme Lord. Thus, the constitutional position of the living being is subordination under the control of the Lord. The foolish living being, especially man, artificially rebels against the law of the Supreme Lord and thus becomes chastised as an asura or lawbreaker. See, the 41st verse is a very important verse. We'll see some more lessons from this. See, in the last line, Sa Samyunakti Bhutani. This is the verse we recited in the beginning, right? Means that we are all brought together by his will, and later we are all separated from each other by his will. So my Guru Maharaj used to say, when we meet other living entities, or when we get separated from them, we need to understand that it's not an accidental event. But all such things are happening as per the will of Krishna. Now, Yudhishthira Maharaj was worried about his uncle Dhṛtarāṣṭra and Gandhari's whereabouts. So Narada Muni gave him good counsel. Prabhupada very nicely says in the purport, Maharaj Dhṛtarāṣṭra was placed in that position according to his past deeds. He had already suffered or enjoyed the benefits accrued to him in the past. But due to his good luck, some or other, he had a good younger brother, Vidura. And by his instruction, he left to achieve salvation by closing all accounts in the material world. It's a very nice statement. By closing all accounts in the material world. We have so many accounts in the material world, right? The phrase closing all accounts in the material world is worth meditating. Without closing the accounts, if we leave the house and go to the forest, then that renunciation will not last long, because our thoughts will always be on the open accounts. Right? So in mundane terms also, having too many accounts open is a problem, as it is difficult to maintain all of them. Likewise, if we keep increasing our accounts of sins and good deeds in this material world, we will have to be lingering around again and again. Also, every time we have some misunderstanding with others, if we don't learn the art of forgiving and forgetting, then we keep that account open. Srimad Bhagavatam also warns us, that it is warning us every time that every desire that remains unfulfilled in this birth, you would have to take one more birth. Please be careful of your desires. Every desire that remains unfulfilled in this birth. So always chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Hare. Just take the shelter of Krishna. See, realizing our ultimate goal of life, when we learn to ignore whatever honor or dishonor we get, then we would remain peaceful. In that state, we will be able to realize that Krishna is in full control of every situation, and we are just puppets in his hands. See, Krishna brings people together and disperses them as per his will. People come in and go out of our lives as per Krishna's will. There is no point of becoming over-elated when we meet someone, or become depressed when we lose their association. The meetings and separations in this material world are all temporary, because this material world itself is temporary. If you want to have eternal connection with any departed soul, then the only way to connect with them is through Krishna. Krishna alone knows where that soul is placed. We can connect with that soul through the process of devotional service to the Supreme Lord Krishna, simply by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. See, Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th canto, 2nd chapter, 21st verse. While consoling his sister-in-law and mother, who are lamenting the death of Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu says, my dear mother, in a restaurant or place for drinking cold water, many travelers are brought together. And after drinking water, they continue to their respective destinations. Similarly, living entities join together in a family. Later, as a result of their own actions, they are led apart to their destinations. Prabhupada beautifully says in this verse, in the material world, a so-called family is a combination of several persons in one home to fulfill the terms of their imprisonment. So as criminal prisoners scatter as soon as their terms are over and they are released, all of us who are temporarily assembled as family members will continue to our respective destinations. Another example given is that family members are like straws carried together by the waves of a river. Sometimes such straws mix together in whirlpools and later dispersed again by the same waves, they float alone in the water. So realizing this, we should neither waste our time, we should neither waste our own time or others' time when we meet each other. So when we meet each other, don't waste your time also and others' time also. Instead, when we meet each other, we should follow what the Supreme Lord has told us through in the verse, seed verse of Bhagavad Gita 10.9. See, in the whole of Bhagavad Gita, this verse tells us how should devotees behave, or what should we do when we meet each other. Machita madgada prana bodhayanta parasparam katayantascha mam nityam tushyanti cha ramanti cha. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. So, Glorification of the Lord is the best thing which we should do when we meet each other. And if Krishna is pleased, then he might give us another opportunity to do that glorification in the association of devotees. See, in the 42nd verse, Narada Muni very nicely instructs Yudhishthira Maharaj that for conditioned souls, it is always best to simply follow the orders of the Supreme Lord. And what does he say in the 42nd verse? As a cow bound to the nose by a long rope is conditioned, so also human beings are bound by different Vedic junctions and are conditioned to obey the orders of the Supreme. The Shastras comes from the root word shasan, which means to rule. So the rules of life are given in the Shastras by Supreme Lord. So when we abide with the rules of the Lord, we are safe. Whenever we slip away from the rules, we are sure to fall. See, even in the material world, there are so many rules laid down by the government for the well-being of citizens. For example, we are not allowed to travel on the footboard of the bus or the trains. But many times we find people break these rules, ultimately die in fatal accidents. So if breaking these man-made laws itself causes so much havoc, we can just imagine how dangerous it is to break the orders of the Supreme. Prabhupada says, the laws of the Lord are severe because they cannot be disobeyed in any circumstances. The man-made laws may be evaded by cunning outlaws. But in the courts of the Supreme Lawmaker, there is not slightest possibility of neglecting the laws. A slight change in the course of God-made law can bring about a massive danger to be faced by the lawbreaker. So one of the rules set by the Supreme Lord is that all living entities in the middle world are subject to death after the stipulated time of stay is over. And if one wishes to get better destination after this life, then one has to qualify for the same by following the rules and regulations laid down by the Supreme Lord. See, demonic people like Hiranyakashipu, Ravana, they tried to outsmart these rules. But ultimately, they failed miserably in their attempts. See, when Krishna has a plan, then we should not be unduly bothered about it because it is always Krishna's plan that works. There is no way we can change it even if we stand upside down. Narada Muni wanted to inform Maharaj Yudhishthira that the departure of Dhṛtarāṣṭra, Gandhari, and Vidura to the forest is as per Krishna's plan. And so it is best for him to simply accept the Lord's plan. Prabhupada says how the conditioned soul becomes free from material existence simply by following the rules of the Lord and his representatives. The factual position of the living being is, however, that he is an eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord, right? So in his liberated state, he renders service to the Lord in transcendent love and thus enjoys a life of full freedom. Even sometimes on an equal level with the Lord or sometimes more than God. So Narada Muni himself is an example of this. Since he is an unflinching servant of the Lord, he is free to travel anywhere and everywhere. He goes uninvited everywhere, even to the residence of demons who don't welcome Krishna. Such is the mercy bestowed by the Lord upon the pure devotees who always abide by his words. That's why in the 43rd verse says, right? As a player sets up and disperses his playthings according to his own sweet will, so the supreme will of the Lord brings men together and separates them. See, the happenings might appear pleasing or displeasing to us. The Lord has a reason behind everything. And the 44th, see, Narada Muni also openly says, whatever feelings of separation we may claim to have towards another living entity, it is all illusory affection. The truth is, we don't love or care for anyone purely. This is more important. We don't, of course, we care, but it's not pure. So feelings of separation are all signs of subtle sense gratification. However, when we love or care for someone as part and parcel of Krishna, without a self-centered vision, the same feelings of separation takes us closer to Krishna. See, the Supreme Lord, Krishna, brings us together for some particular reason and takes us away as per his will. Therefore, we need to abide by his plan 100%, irrespective of whether we like it or not. See, the actual fact is that every living being is an individual part and parcel of Krishna. And his constitutional position is subordinative cooperative service. Either in his conditional material existence or in his liberated position of full knowledge in eternity, the living entity is eternally under the control of the Supreme Lord. This is what Prabhu says in the purport. So the eternal soul transmigrates from one body to another by the law of karma into different material bodies, which are all perishable. So Prabhupada says that there is nothing to be lamented in the case of the souls being transferred into another body or the material body perishing at a certain stage. See, just like matter keeps transforming, so does soul travels from one body to another. And all these are happening under the control of Supreme Lord. Prabhupada says the force of divine energy is uncheckable. No one has any hand in it. Thus, there is no cause of grief. That's why in the 45th verse, he says, therefore, give up your anxiety due to ignorance of the self. You are now thinking of how they, who are helpless poor creatures, will exist without you. This is a very important point to understand. It's a very important message for us. Many times when we are involved in service, be it home, work, or temple, under the influence of the modes, we start thinking, that we are the doers. And without us, that service might not continue, or the people to whom we are rendering the service will become helpless in our absence. This is a great illusion. We should remember this truth, that everything will continue as usual after our death. The shops, the business, everything will continue as it was during our presence. Nothing will stop. But we falsely think that everything depends on us. There's a nice acronym which we should always remember to come out of this illusion of doer mentality and understand our dependence on Krishna. Everybody knows CNN, that's the news channel, CNN. We have no capacity, we are nothing, and we are not needed. CNN. We have no capacity, we are nothing, and we are not needed. Please understand this. When whatever we are able to carry out in this life is also because of Lord's mercy. Without his glance, we cannot even lift our hands or move out of the bed. If we are able to help someone or do some service, that is also because of the Lord's mercy only. We are just instruments in the hands of the Lord. When we think of our kith and kin as being helpless and dependent on us, it's all due to ignorance. Every living creature is allowed to all protection by the supreme order of the Lord in terms of each one's acquired position in this world. The Lord is known as Bhutabrit, one who gives protection to all living beings. So one should discharge his duties only, for no one but the Supreme Lord can give protection to anyone else. That's why in the 46th verse, he says, this God mental body made of 5 elements is already under the control of eternal time, Kala, action, karma, and the modes of middle nature, guna. How then can it, being already in the jaws of serpent, protect others? See, many times we falsely believe that we are indispensable at our home or in the society. But actually, no one is dependent on us. Please understand. Lord is the ultimate protector of all. We would have experienced how a newborn child who loses his or her parents is also taken care by the Supreme Lord through someone else. Same is true for any living entity. Animal, bird, reptile. If Krishna wishes, he can protect any living entity from any kind of helpless situation. Out of illusion or ignorance, only we start thinking that we are the sole protectors of our dependents. Prabhupada says in the purport, the world's movements for freedom through political, economical, social, and cultural propaganda can do no benefit to anyone, for they are controlled by the superior power. He explains as to how most of the time we are under the influence of passion and ignorance, and therefore not in proper position to help others. Even when we are in the mode of goodness, we are still under the influence of time. Our own body is perishable with time. Bhagavatam says that time keeps acting stealthily, like a serpent on each one of us. Also, we are accountable for whatever karma we have done in the past and present, and are bound to face the reactions of the same either in this life or the next life. See, we are further bound by the 3 modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Just like how a prisoner who is bound by chains cannot free another prisoner, what possible relief can we bring for other conditioned souls when we ourselves are entangled by kala, karma, and guna? So realizing this, each one of us should surrender unto Supreme Lord. No one can be saved from the bite of cobra. The best remedy for getting out of the clutches of the cobra, like kala, is recommended in Bhagavad Gita 14.26. See, many times we keep meditating and brooding over the problems of life, instead of turning our attention to Krishna and devotional service. As a result, we get lost in the maze of problems, not knowing how to get out of it. We become unnecessarily anxious and worried about things which either are not in our control or not yet occurred. So all such compound worries kill our valuable time and vital energy, which we can use in the service of Lord, right? That's why Yudhishthira Maharaj was becoming anxious about the well-being of and whereabouts of the uncles and all. And Narada Muni advises him how the Supreme Lord is protecting all the living entities, right from a small ant to Brahmaji, and he will be taken care of. So Krishna is omnipresent. He's all-pervading, right? See, we have to try to see Krishna's hands in everything. The root cause of all the problem is that we fail to see Krishna in everyone. Lord is always blissful, and by looking at him, we will also get the same bliss. But when we keep looking at others' faults, we will always be disturbed by happiness and distress. See, in this regard, we remember one nice instructive conversation, with this I will close, that happened between a businessman and his divine guest Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. The businessman used to regularly come for the darshan of the deities. But when he saw that two brahmacharis in the temple were fighting tooth and nail, he immediately went back without having darshan of the deities. So when Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati came to know of this, he asked him the reason for his departure. Now, the businessman said he came to the temple to get out of the modes in the material nature. And when he saw that the same fighting is going on in the temple also, he was upset. And he went back without darshan. So Prabhupada, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj chastised him, asking him whether he had come to the temple for deity darshan or dosha darshan. So the ultimate loser is the businessman himself, because he had not fulfilled the purpose for his visit. The temple is just like a hospital, where the treatment is going on for curing the material disease of bodily consumption. In a hospital, what do we expect to see? We can only see patients who are undergoing treatment. We cannot expect perfection and thus start criticizing, observing the faults. Now, because they have taken up the process of purification, eventually they will get rid of themselves of all the anarthas. So by concentrating on the fault, the man could not fulfill his interest. Likewise, this material world is a bigger hospital. There will be different kinds of patients around us. Narada instructs us, our prime duty is to simply look at Krishna and cooperate with his mission of helping each other in our path home back to Godhead. So let us pray at the lotus feet of Gurudev, Prabhupada and Acharya so that we can see Krishna always in all situations and serve in cooperation. So in conclusion, the lessons from the life of Dhṛtarāṣṭra in this glorious verses in the chapter, first canto 13th chapter, we saw, no? So Narada Muni informs Maharaj Yudhishthira about how his uncles and aunt have traveled to Himalayan mountains and how Dhṛtarāṣṭra would be performing austerities and leaving the body by burning himself by the power of yogic fire, and how his chaste aunt Gandhari would enter into that fire and end her life as well. See, just like how Vidura did not reveal to Maharaj Yudhishthira about the annihilation of the Yadu dynasty, Narada Muni also did not inform Maharaj Yudhishthira about the same. Instead, he said that Lord would wind up his pastime soon in the middle world, and so the Pandavas also will need to prepare themselves for their final journey. See, we can see, how considerate and careful are devotees like Narada and Vidura. If some news is displeasing or result in great distress to others, then they choose not to reveal it. They are concerned only about the spiritual well-being of others and speak only those things which would help the recipients to focus their attention more on Krishna. Now, since Maharaj Yudhishthira became very anxious when Dhṛtarāṣṭra, Vidura and Gandhari had left the palace, Narada Muni came to Maharaj Yudhishthira's house just to pacify Maharaj Yudhishthira, who was very much affected by the departure of his uncle Santa. That's why in the 59th verse, Narada Muni says, there's so many verses to cover, but anyway, we'll stop here now. This last verse, 59th, 60 verse, but 59th verse, where Vidura being affected with delight and grief, will then leave that place of sacred pilgrimage. So Srila Prabhupada very nicely explains the purport about the reason for Vidura's delight and grief. He said delight and grief. He was happy to see the marvelous departure of his brother Dhṛtarāṣṭra as a liberated yogi. For in his past life, he was much attached to materialism. But he was sorry that he could not make his brother turn into a pure devotee. See, this was not done by Vidura because Dhṛtarāṣṭra, being inimical to the Pandavas, were all devotees of the Lord. So this is one of the most important lessons. Please listen very carefully. Most importantly, we can learn from the life of Dhṛtarāṣṭra. If we have inimical feelings towards Lord's devotees, then we will never get the gift of devotional service and we are sure to be doomed. That's why the purport Prabhupada says, an offense at the feet of a Vaishnava is more dangerous than an offense at the lotus feet of the Lord. Vidura was certainly very liberal to the bestow mercy upon his brother Dhṛtarāṣṭra, whose past life was very materialistic. But ultimately, the result of such mercy certainly depended on the will of the Supreme Lord in the present life. Therefore, Dhṛtarāṣṭra attained liberation only. And after many such liberated states of life, one can attain to the stage of devotional service. So may we remember all these wonderful lessons which we learned from the life of Dhṛtarāṣṭra and the lessons given by Vidur Maharaj and by Narad Muni, and endeavor to put it into practice in our day-to-day lives. We'll stop here. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thy go Hari. So thank you very much, Guru Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam, Prabhuji.